I've been waiting for this segment all week. It is when Steve Young joins KMBR to discuss 49ers football. And of course, after this game against the Cleveland Browns, in which Brock Purdy and the entire 49ers team struggled, I've been waiting to hear what Steve Young was going to tell KMBR. And it is, of course, on point. When is it never not? As you guys already know, we are going to show you what Steve Young had to say about Brock Purdy and gives an honest assessment of his performance. Listen to what he had to say right here.
That's no rain, by the way. No rain. We don't want. Clearly, rain's not our friend, so no more rain.
So we'll play that again. No.
Well, since you mentioned it right off the bat, did you see any? And I was talking to one of my buddies, Steve, during the game, and I said. It's like the Austin Powers movies, Connie, Small Hands, Like I was like, oh, maybe like he's a carny. Maybe he can't grip the ball in the rain.
Like cabbage.
They always used to say that with Pat Hayden when he was playing for the Rams. I got to bring in Joe Namath. He's got the big hands. He can handle the. But what about it? Is it just one game? It's not that big a deal, or maybe his hands aren't that big and the rain gives him some issues.
Well, we're learning. As I've always said, quarterback in the NFL. Not even Brock knows. Like, you have to play it out, right? And you learn as you go, and we all want to guess and figure stuff out. I do want to just, again, lay the groundwork for what has changed in the league in the last few years and why the challenge for Brock is unique. Because, as I've said before, in championship football, there is not going to be another Dan Marino or Peyton Manning. No longer can you in championship football be somebody who can just stand there and throw it. No matter how good you are, the game is so wide open today. You've seen it in all the big games over the last 3 or 4 years, in all the championship games and Super Bowls. It's those quarterbacks going and getting those yards. And Joe Burrow, who loves to stand there and likes to be the idea of Dan Marino or Peyton Manning, has had to go and get those yards. And so I say that to Brock as well. Brock, at some point in the bigger games, he's going to have to. If he can't do it, that's going to be it's going to hurt because the game is that way now. And so, I say to Joe Burrow, I say to Brock as well, you got to get on your horse in the big games, the big moments, to make sure that because those yards are out there and you got to go get them. And that's just, it used to be the college game was that way and the pros, and I was the oddity, but now it's no longer that way. And people have screamed at me, oh, what are you telling me? There's not going to be another Dan Marino. I'm like, no, Dan Marino's amazing, but the game has changed so much that you can't just stand there in championship football. You have to have somebody that can go get those yards. You saw over this weekend, like Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, they were a mess. But where did all the plays come from? They all they stiff arm the lineman, go running out, try to make some big gains. It's like that's where the championship football is played. So if I think about this game, you asked me about this game, I'm thinking about the future. Like everyone wants to kind of overanalyze this one game, but I'm thinking about the future, the things that will allow us to go the places we want to go. Brock's going to have to get on his horse, and he's going to have to go get those yards and make those plays with his legs. And if not, he's going to, as he said before, I'm going to have to figure it out, which means I'm going to have to be that much more efficient, that many more completions, make throws with people in my face many more times. And so that's going to get super difficult. And so if I said about one thing about this last game that I want to see more is Brock, if he can, to go ahead and get those free yards. They're out there, and we need our quarterback to be able to do that.
Yeah. When you were, I don't know how to phrase this properly. I'm not surprised that he struggled, Steve. I'm surprised it took him this long to struggle. To me, that's pretty amazing, but it's how you handle those kind of games, because everyone's going to have them. Even great quarterbacks have them. You just got to know that you're not going to do it 2 games in a row. It's like that's not going to happen again. What's it like when you're going through that as a young quarterback and you have a game like this? Is it easy just to put yourself right back in the mind frame of, look, that's one game, it's a blip, we're good to go? Or because you haven't had to deal with this before, do you do you overthink things, I guess I should say?
Yeah, again, it has been an amazing run.
Incredible.
And in that way, I heard you earlier today talking about quarterbacks need help. Yeah. Like everybody recognizes that. And so if you have enough help, and the help that's been for the 49ers their winning streak, 14 games, was an amazing amount of help, right? Offensive line was top 5 in the league. The receivers top 5 in the league. Offensive innovation, we talk about every week, top 5 in the league. Defense, top 5 in the league. Like, there's tons of help out there. And so in some ways you don't get tested as much as when, things start to devolve, right? And so this game, suddenly people go out of the game. Their MVP candidate with CMCs gets out of the game. What are we going to do? This is a great defense. Things are slow. All of a sudden, somebody on the other side of the field who's never played before is scoring points, and now we got to go figure that out. And I feel like for Brock, if we want to just study him, he's the kind of guy that right now it seems like he's thrived with tons of help. Like, you can feel it. Like, they're just now all of a sudden when things devolve and there's not as much help, that's when, like you said earlier, I heard you saying about when the great quarterbacks and he wants to be great, you figure that out. You got to make it work. And so we thought that would happen last week, and it didn't. So we don't want to see that theme. We don't want to see, hey, things are devolving rough, you're not getting as much help, and all of a sudden you're diminished or you're smaller. I want you to big. It feels like when Patrick Mahomes gets in that situation, he gets bigger, and that's really important for Brock to kind of think about how to do that. Now, if he's somebody that's not going to be out there running around very much, and he's not going to go get those yards and press, and he's not going to be able to throw it up and down the field with an arm that can throw it 60, 70 yards, then again, he's going to have to come up with more plays in tough situations under duress and have to figure that out. And that's a challenge that, is unique to Brock, because you look around the league today, the best teams are run by people who are very dynamic, very big guys who can throw the ball over the field. And so we know that that's not his game. So he's going to have to figure out his own way through an era that's not built for that game. It's not built for Dan. It's not built for Peyton. It's not built. You can't throw your way through it. So how do I figure out ways to run around, make plays when things devolve?
Yeah. It's interesting because I wanted to ask you this because I'm sure there was a point in your career where you transitioned from what I'm about to say to ultimately what I'm going to say, and you're going to know better than I, but when I look at quarterbacks, I look at quarterbacks that are good quarterbacks but are raised up by their teammates, which I think Brock is right now. I think he'd even admit that. Great quarterbacks raise their teammates up. Like that, it kind of, the dynamic shifts a little bit from your teammates raising you up to you raising your teammates up. Do you remember that transition when you became like that quarterback that could, by virtue of how you played, ball placement, play calls you had, you put the team in, and audible stuff, like just anything you could do to raise your team up? Do you remember that kind of, that shift and what it felt like and what it took?
Everybody grows into it. It's nothing that you just arrive with. Like, you have to grow, and you have to grow through the scar, right? I heard what Kurt Warner said this morning, and I did generally agree with the idea that, like, it never starts out just perfect, although this has been pretty perfect.
Yeah.
But it's through the scars where you develop that. And that's why I say not Brock knows. Nobody knows until you actually go through it at the pro level, go through all the scars, and then figure it out. I'm looking at Zach Wilson right now, who has been just diminished and pummeled and thrown to the ground and stomped, and they gave him another chance, and then he's like hanging in there, and it's like the scar tissue on that kid is growing exponentially every week. So Brock, because he gets so much help, he doesn't get in that spot very often, and so in that way, it doesn't. So last week an opportunity to it. We saw a couple in the playoffs, like. There's, the more that happens, the more he grows into it, and we go, oh yeah, and Brock goes, oh yeah. Like, and I don't know that as a pro, you know exactly how it's going to go down.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so hard to predict. I mean, think about all the quarterbacks been drafted, and they think they're going to be great. They're not, because they can't rise up when things go poorly. And so that's another chance. And this week, it's actually a great opportunity this week for Brock to now take everyone going, wow, what was that? And then go on the road and change that. I heard you, Adam, you're talking about the narrative, like change that narrative. Like it's, now I know that he can come back from a bad game. And I know that's all, we haven't seen that yet.
Right.
So it's all the scars that are coming and then fighting through them and thriving despite it is what needs to happen. So everybody wants to decide it right now. And the fact is, you don't know, I don't know, and Brock doesn't know. We got to go through it together. And we'll know it when we see it.
Yeah.
But so far, We should make a movie out of it.
Yes.
Right? So far, it's like the last guy drafted is killing it in the NFL. Let's make a movie out of it.
They might. They made a Warner movie. They may very well. We could get one. Talking to Steve Young on the Uma guest line. And you know what? I've got confidence, one, he'll come back from this. It's so funny after one game, if there is any narrative that we were waiting for the bottom to fall out, it's as if anything he didn't build up any good equity. We just want to see him come back from a down game. But he doesn't strike me as a guy who will try to do too much, Steve. I like he's a game plan guy. I think he loves it so much.
That's why you're getting at him. I'm kind of dancing around this a little bit because I'm trying to figure it out. But I'm trying to figure it out as well, because if I'm right and the game today is such that you have the dynamic player at the quarterback position is what's going to make championship football. Mm-hmm. If you're saying that's not his game, Steve, it's not his game.
That's not what I'm saying.
I don't know. Yeah. I think he's more elusive and can attack the line of scrimmage more than he certainly is today. And I think he could grow into that. So I'm not saying he can't. But if you're saying that he's going to play the position in a very guarded, careful, system way, I think the game is not that game as much anymore. So that makes it hard. And again, the degree of difficulty for Brock to play through that in today's game, especially at the championship level, is harder. And so we're gonna have to keep an eye on that. And if he's got to keep an eye on it, he might have to adjust his game and say, you know what? In those big games, I've got to up the risk level. I've got to create more opportunities. I'm not going to be 14 touchdowns and one interception. I'm going to have to take more risks. So those are things he has to grow in. So again, I don't want to say he can or can't do anything. I said originally, let him cook. I love who he is, and I think we got to just live through that and hope that the dynamic nature of the game today, that he can fill that void in his own Brock Purdy way.
So throw 50 times this week. That's what we want, right?
Man, but you bring up the real. You guys asked a great question.
Yeah.
Yes, the great question is, look, he's very efficient.
Right.
Remember, I've talked about it for weeks. Guardrails are tight. He's not going to have a terrible game, and he's not going to have he's had some great games, but he's not going to have that 4 interception game. He's not going to do it. And so at that level, is that in the big ball games, close ball games, when it all needs to go down the last couple of possessions, is it something that he needs to now expand on and take more risk? Or can he? Those are the things we just got to see how it goes.
So shout out to Steve Young. Phenomenal insight as always. But what did you guys think about what Steve Young had to say about Brock Purdy and the struggles that he had against the Cleveland Browns? Are you concerned long-term for Brock, or do you think it was just a little hiccup? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you want to listen to the full interview of Steve Young on KNBR, make sure you go sub to their channel, link in the description. And as always, make sure you like and subscribe for more updates.